All right, everybody, welcome back. So this is the first part of a two-part lecture series here on mollusk, and we're going to cover characteristics and anatomy in this one. In the second video, we will cover the physiology of the systems. So continuing here, we're going to look at the kingdom, still in the kingdom Animalia, in the phylum Mollusca. So objectives here again to learn the taxonomic relationships. We're going to be looking at the internal and external anatomy of two exemplars, the clam and squid specifically, and then as well as understanding the physiology of the major systems in both bivalves and cephalopods. We'll also look at the snails and slugs, so the gastropods as well. So as you can see here, looking at our phylogenetic tree, we are here in the mollusk. So to date, we've talked about sponges, cnidarians, flatworms, annelids, and roundworms, and we're jumping back slightly to look at the mollusks. So if you'll notice, the closest living relative to mollusks are actually the segmented worms, and for various reasons, as we talked about with roundworms being more advanced with being dioecious than the annelids, the segmented worm. So in the mollusks here, we'll continue on looking at these particular synapomorphies, the mantle, molluscular foot, and the visceral mass. So mollusks are incredibly diverse, the second largest phylum on the planet. So again, their diversity spans mostly within the marines. We have chitons, we have the bivalves, scallops, clams, mussels, etc., gastropods, snails and slugs, and octopus and squid. So just a little slide here, just kind of showing the major diversity there. So jumping in straight into the characteristics from your hot sheet. So these are bilateral symmetrical. So again, all animals in the animal kingdom except sponges and cnidarians show bilateral symmetry, at least at some point in their lifespan. They are triploblastic, meaning they have those three germ layers, endo, ecto, and mesoderm. They are unsegmented as opposed to their nearest relatives, the annelids, the segmented worms. They are dioecious, which means, again, they are separate sexes. We can't really tell externally male and female, so these are, but internally these guys will have either the male or female genitalia. These are characterized by, again, being soft-bodied by a calcareous shell, and no surprise here that hardening is from a compound we've seen multiple times now, calcium carbonate, so CaCO3. So again, they do have a complete digestive tract. So as you can see here, get my laser pointer. So we have in a snail here, we have the mouth running through the esophagus, all the way through here to the stomach, through the intestines, and then finally it's going to swirl around here and out the anus. So a complete digestive tract, unlike the sac body plans that we've seen in the sponges and jellyfish. These guys here have a complete, just like us. So with it being complete, it is complex. Mollusks are unique in that most mollusks have what's known as a radula for a tongue. And notice here on this micrograph here that a radula very closely resembles that of a woodworking chisel. So if you ever worked with a chisel or a wood lathe, the same concept here. So what these guys would do is as they're feeding, this radula is going to essentially chisel or scrape off the organisms that they're trying to consume. They do have a fully lined coelom, but typically limited around the heart. So this is different than the nematodes, which had a pseudocoelom. So these guys here, the body cavity is a full coelom there. So again, this coelom will act as a hydrostatic skeleton like it did in our roundworms. However, because it is a full coelom there, this allows for a lot more complex systems within our mollusk. So cephalization is just a vocab word we've seen before. So now we're starting to see some distinct head regions and the orientation of neurons and nervous systems toward a distinct location, which will then become better known as the brain. We do have an open circulatory system. So here it's showing you the difference between open and closed circulatory system. So in our annelids, we talked about being the closed circulatory system, just like in us. Heart already pumps blood away from the heart. Capillaries kind of disperse the blood and oxygen, picking up CO2 and O2, etc., and bringing the veins, bringing it back into the heart. And an open circulatory system, it's a little different. So again, we still have the hearts there. They're going to pump blood away from the artery just as there before, but instead of it being completely closed, like in a closed circuit of an electric house or whatever, these guys here are going to simply have a little bit of a break where the blood is allowed to kind of diffuse, operate in kind of this kind of like cesspool. And then by the properties of diffusion, high to low concentrations, the blood is then going to diffuse back in through the heart there. A little bit different there. So as you can imagine, some limitations that may apply with some type of open circulatory system as far as definitely your stamina per se. So the larval stage, as traditional there, we have a different name for the larva. This is a trochophore. It's a free-swimming organism. We'll show you pictures later on when we get to the reproductive cycle in video 2. But the chromatophores are a very unique adaptation for most of the cephalopods, including squid and octopi, and that it's their camouflaging pigment. And so essentially their skin has sacs of browns, yellows, sometimes reds and greens that can expand or contract. And the best analogy I have here is essentially a water balloon with a little bit of dye. And as this water balloon is contracted, you will notice the change in coloration. So pretty neat little analogy here of a chromatophore. So the squid, an octopus, cuttlefish, etc., have such an incredible ability to change not only their color, but sometimes their textures. And it all depends on how much their chromatophores expand or contract to allow different colors to blend through. So as you see on the diagram down below here, toward the peripheral of the skin, the chromatophores here, as their skin contracts and gets smaller, it allows different colors to bleed through. And then if they want to appear darker, then they will expand their chromatophore, allowing more of the reds and black tones to develop, which is pretty remarkable. We'll watch a video again in the second series that really shows just how remarkable these guys are. Again, I'm just astounded by their ability to camouflage. So where am I? So most mollusks are marine, which again means totally in the salt water. We do have some that's made the transition from marine to freshwater, and again, that is such a remarkable adaptation. So I heard an analogy once for in a bull shark, for example, who can live both in saltwater and in freshwater. And the analogy that was given was essentially the equivalency of us being able to breathe here on the Earth as well as on the moon. That is just how different these two water environments are, saltwater and freshwater, and the different osmoregulators that need to develop to allow us to regulate our salt and water balance. And then even more remarkable, these guys here have actually kind of spanned the gambit of ecosystems and now going from marine to freshwater, and also even have conquered the terrestrial environment, which again includes its own challenges of how do I stay moist, especially if, and you'll see here in a few slides, that snails and slugs still require gills and a way to maintain moisture to help with their breathing. So again, looking at our snail, you'll notice that essentially all mollusks are just a coiled mass of these vital organs wrapped in a dorsal shell. And we'll talk about these 5 major structures, with the gill being one of those. So we tend to think of that, looking at a snail is kind of a neat little organism, but inside that shell is a feathery-like gill that must maintain moisture and mucus environment to facilitate the diffusion of oxygen. So let's look at these 5 major structures found in almost all mollusks here. This slide here is just fantastic in that It shows an ancestor to all early mollusks. This is just an artistic representation here. But essentially, this mollusk here developed, again, from the annelids, the segmented worms. And we see the shell, we see the digestive tract, we see the gills in green, the mantle in blue, and the foot in red. And as we diversify and specialize in our own areas, we can see how these mollusks still maintain those structures, but we just adapted it. And again, we talk about this all the time about what came first, the landline or the cell phone. Even the cell phone, what came first, the flip phone or the smartphone? And so life has always found a way to adapt to what they have, because again, there is no way of telling the future. So in snails, you can see here the mantle, the shell there, the foot, how it helps it move and locomotion. The gills are inside the shell there, as well as the mantle cavity. In the squid, the foot has been modified into what we typically think of as their arms and tentacles. Right? The mantle in the shell is highly reduced, so squid have an internal shell that we'll learn known as a pen, and then the gills and mantle cavity as well. In the clams and bivalves there, the foot makes up most of what we tend to eat, the foot and the visceral mass. So if you have ever eaten oysters on the half shell or raw clams, etc., most of the time, like I said, we'll learn out exactly what we're eating. It's pretty remarkable if you think about it. So looking at this body plan again, all mollusks have this muscular foot. And just some details here of how they can use their foot depending on what type of organism you are. So it's typically just a broad, flat muscular organ for locomotion, for movement, but it can also be specialized into the ventral side, which again is the belly side. For snails, it's used for crawling. For clams, they can plow that in the mud using their siphons and their foot. Sorry for the typo there. And squids can use their foot to catch their prey, again with their arms and their tentacles. The mantle, also known as the shell, has, again, it's a hard structure, can be internal like it is in the squid and octopi, or external like it is in snails and our bivalves. Specialized part of the dorsal, so the dorsal being, again, the back side, and the mantle contains glands that make the shell, and it generally overhangs the visceral mass and forms a mantle cavity, which we'll look at mantle cavities more specifically in just a couple slides. The visceral mass there is essentially all of the internal organs protected, right? So it's usually located above the foot, and most of our organisms have a radula, like we said before. That's that chisel-like rasping tongue that's able to scrape and help crush their food. And again, all mollusks, even snails and slugs, have gills. So looking at the head-foot region, most mollusks, believe it or not, which is just remarkable, and why a lot of, anti-evolutionists will come up with this idea of complex design, looking at the eye of the squid in particular, and look at the saying so complex. And we say all that basically to say that, again, these are very complex eyes, and in the squid and octopus, and can be in the bivalves, and like for example here, the scallop, these little eyes, blue eyes here, can just kind of more or less just detect the light and some movement. If you've ever been scallop fishing in Homosassa or whatever. And the shell's again made of calcium carbonate. So again, that's essentially a component of limestone there. Can be incredibly diverse. If you've ever, again, gone to the beach, picked up seashells, looked in any of those souvenir shops, you'll notice the quite diversity that these organisms are able to secrete this calcium carbonate and make all types of different shapes and sizes and colors, which is pretty neat. The mantle cavity is essentially, again, just the space between the visceral mass, which is essentially all your body organs, as you see here, and the mantle itself, the mantle cavity. Okay, so you got the mantle, which is the shell, the visceral mass, and the space in between the body organs, the visceral mass, and the shell is known as the mantle cavity. So looking here, you can see the anatomy of a clam or mussel, some type of bivalve here. So again, a good strategy with anatomies, find something that you can always find and work your way through it. So I always like to start with the pathway of digestion because I'm going to get several key anatomical parts in that sequence. So starting here with the mouth, the radula. Most clams honestly do not have a radula, so this is a little bit over exaggeration, but it's still a good illustration here. Mouth radula here, we're going into the esophagus, to the stomach. We're going to whirl around into the intestinal tract here, and we're going to go outer anus. So just picking up the pathway of digestion, I've located 5 to 6, 7 anatomical structures just in the pathway. And typically, if you follow this again, the pathway of digestion, you're going to find some type of digestive gland that's secreting enzymes to help the organism digest their food. So no surprise here, next to the stomach, we find some digestive glands that's going to help. So again, in humans, this would probably be more advanced like a pancreas, but these guys are not that advanced digestively yet, speaking. So and then we move through here as an nephridium, which is essentially a kidney-like cell. So this is going to help structures. This is going to help regulate water, salt, and sugars as well, right? Moving slightly up. So interestingly enough, the heart is on the dorsal side of a clam. It's surrounding an coelom. Again, a coelom is just a body cavity, right? And reproductive structure shown here. If you ever open up a clam before it's like served on a half shell, whatever, so dissecting, you'll definitely be able to see a gill. The gill actually spans, all of the visceral mass, but the artist here has taken away so we can see behind and see what's actually inside this. Internally here, again, it's going to look just kind of like a ball of brown mass. And if you cut this, dissect this in half there, you may be able to see some of these internal structures. It's very difficult without looking at dozens and dozens to kind of figure these things out. And underneath there is the visceral mass. There is the foot. And the difference in the foot and visceral mass is quite easy, especially if you're with a probe, because the foot is much more muscle, so it's a lot harder. Then the visceral mass kind of has a little give to it. So you can pause the video here and see how many you can name. All right, so I'm assuming you paused the video there, and just to kind of check yourself and see there. So again, starting here at the very top of the shell is called the umbo, and clams and oysters actually grow kind of like in trees, in that you can actually count how old they are by the number of rings. So again, the pathway, mouth, stomach, the intestines, all around. Eventually going to go out the anus. We have two major muscles, which keeps clams. It makes them very difficult to open. You have the posterior shell muscle and the anterior shell muscle. The heart, the coelom around it, right? We talked about that. The kidney, the gills, the foot. Better drawn here. I think I got everything. Oh, and the reproductive gland. So again, hope you did well. If you're done, again, just back it up just a little bit, pause, and try again. So now we're going to move on to the squid. Look at the anatomy of a squid here. So we have external and internal anatomy to deal with. So with the squid, they have a fin, which is going to help them swim. We have the mantle, which again, remember that's typically the shell, but the shell in this case is on the inside there. We have this remarkable eye. We have a siphon, which is going to help them propel. We have 8 arms and 2 tentacles. So arms are shorter than tentacles, but both arms and tentacles do have those suction cups that we kind of have known around for movies and things like that. So looking internally here, so again, I like to follow the pathway of digestion. So not surprising here is that here's the foot, the arms and tentacles. The mouth is going to be therein. The mouth is actually almost like a bird beak. If you ever get a chance to dissect one of these, very, very hard. Right inside that bird beak or that buccal cavity there is going to be the radula, that tongue, following through the pharynx, the esophagus, the intestines, then the stomach, and then right off to the stomach, you have this large organ called the cecum. The cecum is essentially a extension of the intestinal cavity, where bacterial will kind of help aid in digestion. So it's just kind of a storage and helps digest there. Moving through, coming around underneath the heart here, out the anus. So here is a male a male squid, with we'll see the reproductive. We've got a penis, which means that we're going to have our gonads up here, right? Our mantle, internal mantle here is the pin, which goes from the tip all the way up to the end of this collar, right? We have brain, we have ganglia, which means we're going to have a nerve core. Liver, not stereotypically, or stereotypically I should say, is the liver is usually one of the larger organs internally there. They actually have 3 hearts, and so if you follow the gill, you're going to have a brachial heart, which they call here a gill heart, and a systemic heart. And so essentially the gill heart is going to pump blood to the gills, deoxygenated blood, and the systemic heart is going to pump blood systemically or throughout the body. So again, 3 hearts there, and then finally out the siphon. So pretty neat. So again, the different structure here, I want you to pause the video, see how many structures you can name, and then we'll reconvene in just momentarily. All right, so again, assuming that you stopped the video there, just kind of give you an idea how you did. So again, check yourself. If you didn't do very well, it's all right. Back it up and try again. So again, we learn through doing. So again, this concludes the part 1 of our mollusks, which covered the characteristics and the general anatomy of the squid and the clam. Hope you enjoyed. Look forward to mollusk video number 2, where we cover the systems and the physiology within those systems. Thank you. Have a good day.